Okay, family, so today we're going to be talking about the language of the ancestors. Is the Egyptian language really an Afro-Asiatic language, or is it just simply an African language? Language is a very important aspect of culture. It is the book of the people's experience. According to Fernandez Saussure, the surest to prove cultural contact between people is to produce linguistic evidence. In his book titled The General History of Africa, the author claimed that one of the largest inhabitants of Egypt were the Yorubas, and more than 500 vocabularies can be deduced in the ancient Egyptian language, devoid of the mixture of Greco-Roman and Arab words. Due to colonization, the Yoruba language has been diluted, but in its much purest form, you will find plenty of pronunciations and words that mean the same in ancient Egypt and Yoruba. Jonathan Olumide Lucas points at certain words that survive in pronunciation and in meaning in both Egypt and Yoruba. The Egyptians and the Yorubas used the word ku or aku to mean death. For example, he says that the Yoruba believe that every human being possesses a ku, which in Yoruba means he or she dies. In ancient Egypt, ku meant to give up one's spirit. Obviously, in both Egypt and Yoruba, ku means the same. Is this just a coincidence? I think not. And these are just some of the words that have survived in both Egypt and Yoruba, but there are hundreds. Joseph Greenberg coined the Egyptian language as Afro-Asiatic, but modern academia tells us that the so-called Afro-Asiatic language was born in Africa. So why would it be called Afro-Asiatic when it's spoken among 90% indigenous Africans? Negro-Egyptian is a language family that was initially developed by Theophilo Obango and then further refined by Jean-Claude Mboli using the historical comparative method. The Negro-Egyptian language family was expressed in order to address the perceived lack of standards labeled by Joseph Greenberg. None of the labels had been proven by historical comparative method, which is the standard of reconstructing language families. During the 1974 UNESCO Cairo Symposium, the peopling of the ancient Egyptian and deciphering of the Marathi script, Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Obango were among its participants. Continuing in the work of Diop, Theophilo Obango focused on linguistics demonstrations. Obango criticized Joseph Greenberg's method based on the accepted fact that linguistic evidence is the means to establishing two or more people as being culturally related. He proved that the Egyptians and modern African languages are genetically related. Genetic similarities relies on establishing the sound and other forms of speech through linguistic comparisons between the units of language that cannot be further divided. Based on phonetic correspondence, common earlier forms between the similar language are able to be arrived. So basically, the exact same role the Sanskrit served in the Indo-European languages is the same role ancient Egyptians would serve in the African languages. Theophilo analyzed notable similarities in grammar as well as examined the word forms of ancient Egyptian and numerous African languages. The demonstrated forms, meaning, and use of words served as proof for the close relationship between ancient Egyptians and modern Black Africans. The level of similarities found between ancient Egyptians and modern Black African languages are considered by Obango to be impossible to demonstrate between Semitic and Berber languages. Mboli was critical of Eurocentric African linguists who solely use ideology and dismissible methods rather than use a traditional linguistic type of approach that does not enable changing conclusions to be drawn. He emphasized strict enforcement of the comparative method in African linguistics. He also indicated that only a rigorously applied comparative method is able to prove a genetic similarities. And when combined with internal reconstruction, it enables insight into the initial stages of human language. There is a strong relationship between language, thought, and culture that can only be explained by African linguistics. Mboli used the historical comparative method to pioneer the rearrangement and validation of Obanga's Negro-Egyptian. He rearranged Negro-Egyptian into three major phases: Archaic Egyptian, Classic Egyptian, and Post-Classic Negro-Egyptian. Mboli demonstrated the genetic relatedness of the Sango people of Niger and the Middle Egyptians, and that they share the same ancestral language. From a third eye view, one can see that the ancient Egyptian language belonged to a language family that included the West and Central African. The label Joseph Greenberg gave the language is race-based, which also makes it unscientific. Simple and plain, Jean-Claude Mboli says that the Yoruba did not get their language from the Egyptians, but both languages stem from the same language family.